What's going on, everybody? I'm in a second, and this is Gin Promotions. Today, I'm here with Jack Williams, MSU alum and site expert at fansided.com. Jack, how are we doing today, bro?
I'm doing pretty great. How are you doing?
Doing good. So basically, tell me a little bit about what you do. Tell me about your experience at MSU, what you studied, and where you wound up as your career choice, at least for right now.
Yeah, so I started as a marketing major, and then I don't know, I didn't think I was going to get into the business college, and I just switched to advertising just to play it safe. And then I ended up loving creative advertising. And I got to like create shit. I got to write a lot. I got to like create videos and shit. So it was really cool. And then am I allowed to swear on here, by the way?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
We do say this is a kid show, but listen, we're expecting these kids that are watching it to, know a little bit of explicit language. So we want to get them started early if they haven't heard it already. So
they'll get there.
It's completely fine.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I ended up with advertising, and then I graduated into COVID and couldn't find a job. So I just ended up being a contributor at Fansided, which is like super easy. Like anybody, it's kind of like a really entry level thing. And eventually I just applied to be a site expert, and it worked out. So now I write like 5,000 words a day, and it can be exhausting, but it's really nice to just be able to write about sports for a living.
Yeah, that's really sweet, and I actually found, for everybody wondering, I found Jack on Twitter, basically seen him tweeting about some sports related stuff, and we connected and wound up getting this podcast set up, and I'm glad that we did. But that's really cool, Jack, and it's cool to talk about everything and everyone's experience with, especially the people that graduated through COVID. It really poses an interesting perspective on, how to go into the job force, because it's not really a traditional way to, exit college and then get into the real world. So that's really interesting that you had to go through that, and that you seem to have found your role in something that you enjoy.
Right. Yeah. Well, I know, and it's ridiculous. I can't even imagine some people, because I had 2 internships, like the year before and the year after, and then I had a contract job, and it was still like impossible to find any, like I wasn't getting any job offers, or I had one interview. I have a job sheet, and I applied to like something like 80 to 90 jobs, and I got a single interview. That's it. So it's brutal. I can't even imagine, like some people probably still looking.
Right. Oh yeah. It's brutal out there, especially right now. I think hopefully we're on the back 9 of the whole COVID-19 pandemic. So hopefully people are starting to get off of unemployment. And I know people have got comfortable with that too, and they're starting to get back into the workforce, because I know a lot of businesses are hurting for finding workers. So you're a site expert at Fansided. That's really cool. Can you tell me about some of the sports that you specialize in writing about?
Yeah, so I do. I started with just one site. I started with the Memphis Grizzlies site, and that was interesting to me, because I had kind of fallen off with the NBA for a while. I think a lot of people have. It's just like, if it's not the playoffs, it's hard to get into it. But I actually think it's been like really the way they've done this season with the play-in tournament has been super engaging, I think, because the Grizzlies, rather than, they've been kind of bouncing between like 8, 9, 10 seed all year long. And it's like, you can't get comfortable anywhere. Like they're in the 9 seed now, but they were in like one of the best games of the season last night against the Warriors, just to get into a certain seed in the play-in. So I think it's really cool that they're doing that. But anyway, I also covered the Texas A&M as well, and I had to get acquainted with them. I didn't. I was a big fan of Kellen Mond when he was there, and obviously I watched a ton of Johnny Football. But now I'm knee deep in Texas A&M football, and the basketball team's a mess. But yeah, that's basically the 2 teams I cover.
That's an interesting duo, the Memphis Grizzlies and Texas A&M. I guess, how did you get put into that role to cover those 2 kind of non-related teams, or schools, or areas, whatever you want to call it?
The Grizzlies was just the team that I was watching. Like, again, I said I wasn't really that into the NBA, and then you have these MSU guys in the NBA like Jaren Jackson Jr. is on the Grizzlies, and then I was always a huge fan of John Morant, just his explosiveness and stuff. And then Xavier Tillman was on the Grizzlies, and they've had a ton of injuries throughout the year, so he was getting a huge amount of playing time. So I sought out that one. Like, I went out of my way to try to get the Grizzlies site, because that's just the team that I was watching anyway. So I was already, and I had watched them a lot. I really loved the whole Mike Conley, Marc Gasol era. Like, I just thought it was such a cool team, almost like the Atlanta Hawks team that had no four all-stars, but no like big superstar. I just think I love watching teams like that can do it that way. But yeah, so I sought out the Grizzlies one, and then the Texas A&M one. They gave me. I requested another site, and they gave me like a list of teams, and I was like, I don't know how nobody's taken Texas A&M. It's like such a huge market, so I hopped on that as soon as I could.
Okay, so that's cool. So they basically gave you, after you picked maybe your one that you were really interested in, you get to pick that one, then you get to pick another one from a list that is basically for the taking.
They had to kind of see how I did with the first site for a while. It wasn't one came like 2-3 months before the other.
Okay, I got you. That's really cool. Yeah, the Memphis Grizzlies. So we do a lot of sports betting over here at Gym Pros, and the Memphis Grizzlies are one of those teams that are more or less very unorthodox. You might see them not be that favorable with the spread, but you might see them winning games against teams where you might not think that they could beat them. Because everyone's like, oh, the Grizzlies. Oh, who's the Grizzlies? It's like, oh, they're not like the Golden State Warriors or the Lakers. Right. So you look at them like that, but they still can pull out some crazy wins. So I guess another question on top of that, what really gave you, other than just the playoffs and the MSU players that have played for the Grizzlies, what kind of spurred your interest into the NBA, and what helped that interest grow?
Yeah, well, I guess I kind of got back into it with when they did the bubble season. I don't know. I thought it would be kind of crazy to see because I usually would watch just the playoffs. When I was younger, I would watch every single NBA game. But lately I had kind of fallen into just the playoffs and important games. But I watched a lot of the bubble season, and I don't know. I just thought there's like this almost like a resurgence of energy that these teams have been playing with. Because for the past like 5 years, the main thing that's kept me out of it is that I've gotten really into college basketball, and it's just so intense. Every single play is so intense. And with the NBA, it's just so dull sometimes. And I think they have bounced back from that, because it's not, I don't know. It feels like there's more energy in the game now ever since the bubble started. And I think like I said before, the play-in I think helps a lot, because every team is fighting for something at least until like the last, like even the worst teams have a chance to get into that 10 seed pretty deep into the season.
Yeah, that's true. You have the bubble. That's kind of something that's you never really heard of before. COVID kind of forced that. And then now this year we got the play-in tournament, which has sparked a bunch of controversy across everybody, right, both players and fans. I guess let me ask you this. How do you think the play-in tournament will affect the overall landscape of the NBA playoffs?
I'm all for the play-in. I know a lot of people hate the play-in because they think that a 7 or 8 seed earned a 7 or 8 seed, so they should be in, and it's only 10 less games. But I don't know. I'd have to have the numbers. I don't believe a 7 or 8 seed has ever even won the finals. So why not add 9 and 10 into that and make things interesting for a little longer? You know what I mean? I think it's great. I don't know. What was the original question?
I was just wondering how you think that changes the entire landscape of the playoffs, other than adding those teams, maybe teams that might not have made it otherwise, just kind of throwing them in the mix, almost similar to the play-in tournament that MSU found themselves in March Madness against UCLA. I think it's a good idea. I think it allows those bubble teams to earn their spot and earn their right to compete for the title. And I think it's right. I'm definitely for it. But I can definitely see how, especially NBA players, can be against it just because they don't want those teams to be in it. You either want them to be in or out. And I can easily see both sides of that argument.
Right. Yeah, I can see the other side of the argument, but I just think it's kind of ridiculous. Like there's so many fan bases. I mean, NBA Twitter's it's such a shit show, but the Mavericks fans were going on about how horrible the play-in tournament is and how it sucks, and because they were projected to be like a 7 or 8 or even 9 seed for a while, and all of a sudden they're in the playoffs and you don't hear anything about it. And I just think, it's whatever fits your narrative. Like, obviously I'm covering the Grizzlies, so the Grizzlies are there, benefits me.
Right. So I guess let me ask you this. So say the Grizzlies are out of it. Is there anything for you to cover or write about? Like, do you have to write about maybe off court happenings, or can you cover other NBA teams?
Yeah, no, I can't do. I mean, I'm still a contributor for some other sites, but for the Grizzlies specifically, I can cover other NBA teams as long as I can relate it to the Grizzlies. It's gonna be a learning curve in the off season, really, because I'm not totally sure. I don't know. I'm gonna have to figure out what to cover in the off season. I know in the college site for Texas A&M, it's much simpler because I can do recruiting, and I mean I can do any sport for Texas A&M. For the NBA, it's gonna have to be. I mean, I can always, if Luka hit. I don't know if you saw Luka's buzzer beater against the Grizzlies a while back.
Yeah, I saw it.
If he does something again, I could even write like Luka. I could write something about Luka Doncic doing it again, or as long as I can relate it to the Grizzlies. It'll probably get slow at some point, though.
I got you. Cool. You'll have to get creative at that point, kind of like you did in the beginning, getting this site expert job. So I got faith in you. Let's talk about NBA Twitter. So you mentioned NBA Twitter. It's kind of a shit show. You kind of get lost in the sauce a little bit. I can immerse myself, and I'll be on my phone for probably 6 hours, just looking at NBA, different hashtags and different stuff like that. Looking at stuff that the wide world of WAB is retweeting. It's kind of a mess. I guess what allows you to get immersed into that, and how do you take stuff away from it without getting too lost in the BS?
Yeah, well, I think there's a certain, because I wasn't really involved in NBA Twitter until I started covering the Grizzlies, and what I discovered is that most of the fans are like 12 years old, so you can't take things too personal. Like one of my contributors did a post about Blake Griffin and how he wrote something in the post like he hasn't dunked in a year, but I'm sure he could throw down if someone threw him a lob or something like that. And this guy just came full force. Like, it's not like a peaceful disagreement. The guy comes in and he's like, "You're such an idiot. Blake Griffin hasn't dunked in a year. Why would he be able to dunk now?" And then in Blake Griffin's first game, he dunks the ball. In the second game, he had like a crazy dunk. And it's like, NBA Twitter represents the initial overreaction to everything. They're never totally wrong in what they say. You just have to kind of read what they say and take a step back and be like, okay, maybe they have a little bit of a point, but they tend to just go with the huge overreaction.
Definitely. Yeah. You kind of got to take everything people say on there with a grain of salt, and just kind of roll with it and look at it objectively. Cause a lot of people, they're going to make themselves look like idiots. And that's just Twitter in general. That's what people can do. Keyboard warriors are always active. They work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's something that's not new to the world of Twitter and or the world of social media. So that's really cool. I guess, how do you kind of formulate your stories that you write? I guess, what do you write? Do you just like write articles based on stuff that happens with the Grizzlies, or do you write like opinion pieces? How does it work?
Yeah, well, that's the thing about Fansided is that I sort of have the freedom to write about anything that relates to the Grizzlies. So generally speaking, I do a lot of opinion pieces. We don't cover news that much, like breaking news, just because there's so many sources that are on it. Like within a second, there's really no purpose in us getting that. But we'll take stories and add a twist. We sort of create narratives in a lot of ways. So like if a player gets traded to the Grizzlies, it would be, five areas where Justice Winslow will have an impact on the Grizzlies offense, or well, not, he sucks at offense, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. If it happens with the Grizzlies, doesn't matter if they're a bench player, if they never play, or if they play all the time. It's worthy of a story from you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Gotcha. Let's transition a little bit. Let's talk about MSU sports. So I heard that you are a little bit of an enthusiast in both MSU basketball and MSU football. Let me ask you this. How do you feel Mel Tucker will do in his second year as head coach for the Michigan State Spartans?
See, I don't even know. Last year was such a confusing season. It's hard to gauge how he'll do this year, because I actually thought he would have done better in his first year, just because, and I do think you can kind of write off that Rutgers loss in a way.
That was tough, man. That was tough to watch.
Right. They play him 10 more times, they'll win at least 9 of those games. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so.
So I in year 2, I don't know. He's bringing in a ton of talent. And Russo looked really good in the spring game. I know they'll take a step forward. There's no doubt that they'll win more than 3 or 4 games. I think they'll probably win around 5 games, but I don't see the long term with Mel Tucker. I'm also a Bears fan, and I saw Mel Tucker in Chicago, and he quite literally was the worst defensive coordinator in Bears history. So I have a little bit of a sense, a little
bit of animosity.
Yeah,
I know. I hear you. But you get along good with my roommate. He's a big Bears fan too. Yeah.
This might be the year with Fields coming back.
I like that. I like that draft pick. I like it. It's
the first time. It's funny because people talk about, I don't mean to get off topic, but people always talk about how Chicago, it's like he's going to go to Chicago and he's going to suck. But Chicago has had such awful quarterbacks. Like, there hasn't been a guy who's the best, most talented quarterback to come into Chicago in the last 30 years. It's probably Jay Cutler. You know what I mean? Like, it's
that's even hard to say. It's hard to say Jay Cutler because, it's just Jay Cutler, and I'm looking at that objectively from a non-Bears fan perspective. Right. So that might carry a little bit less weight than maybe a Bears fan would. But let's address one of these comments here. So I got my Uncle John just commented, "Hey, John. Hey, Jack. I use FanSided for my fantasy DFS picks, but it seems I can't get much content anymore. Are they still heavy in the DFS? One more question. Your thoughts on how Kellen Mond does in the NFL with the Vikings backing up MSU's Kirk Cousins? I watched some A&M last year, and he is a gunslinger." Jack, you want to address that?
Yeah. As for the DFS picks, I'm not totally sure on that. Generally speaking, if certain stuff works, they'll jump on it and they'll cover it a ton, but sometimes they'll just die out for no particular reason. So I'm not really sure. I could check up on that, but I don't know. I haven't. I don't know. I haven't dipped into that. But as for Kellen Mond, the Vikings aren't really getting anything from winning Kirk Cousins for holding on to Kirk Cousins. Like, if we're honest here, he's not going to win a Super Bowl. Like, does anyone see Kirk Cousins winning a Super Bowl? I think that's kind of like something you can just feel that he's not going to. So I don't really see why they're holding on to him. I bet you Kellen Mond is getting significant playing time by the end of the year. The Vikings will probably be like 7-8, and they'll start throwing him in there.
Yeah, I could see that too. Kirk Cousins, he was a great quarterback here at MSU. We always pull for him as MSU fans and alums. We want to see him do well. We see spurts of energy come from him multiple times in the season, even when he played for the Redskins, the Washington football team. But I think I agree with you, Jack. I don't see that fire within him enough to really push him right into a position where he will have a significant chance of winning a Super Bowl, let alone making a decent playoff run. Right. So I think that Kellen Mond is going to get a lot of PT this year, and they might kind of go back and forth with both Kirk and Kellen just to kind of feel it out. And I think just to touch on the Bears a little bit, not to talk about them too much, but I think that Justin Fields might be sitting on the bench for a little bit. They're going to give Andy Dalton that chance at first string for quarterback. Obviously, they just
Mhm.
acquired him. So I think that they're going to feel him out too. Do you think Justin Fields will get much playing time?
I don't think he'll get what I mean. Well, what you have to keep in mind is that Nagy is now coaching for his job. So I don't think, it makes you think of Glennon starting over Trubisky a few years back. They kind of stuck with him a little longer than they should have. And obviously that was Fox as head coach back then, but I think they'll see that and they're not going to keep, I don't think they're going to keep Dalton out there unless he plays well somehow. I don't know. I don't see how that would happen, but I think the whole like grooming a rookie under Dalton thing is, what are you getting out of that? Like it's Andy Dalton. It's not like it's Tom Brady that he's sitting behind. When you hear about young quarterbacks who were groomed under another quarterback and then end up being really good, it's always like, it's Aaron Rodgers under Brett Favre, or you know what I mean? I just think I don't see the point in holding Fields on the bench very long, and I don't think that I think he'll see the field pretty early. I think he'll take the starting job.
I think it would be a smart position to play him somewhat early, just because looking at what he did, seeing his resiliency in Ohio State against Clemson in this year's championship, or the playoffs going into the championship. I think that just seeing that grit and that tenacity, and I've always said this about Justin Fields, I know that he has the capabilities, and he's a lot tougher than he looks. He's not a huge guy, but he can take a hit. He can bounce back. He can get right back up after getting smoked from behind. And quarterbacks don't like that, especially we can see that with Russell Wilson. I think we even see that a little bit with Aaron Rodgers. They're tired of getting hit. They're tired of, certain things that are nagging them, and they want and deserve better, essentially.
Well, that's something that I'm worried with Fields too, is that he looked extremely tough in the playoff, but he had such good protection at Ohio State that we don't know how he's going to do with the Bears offensive line, which was suspect last year, and they've made moves to improve it, but you wonder, because that was kind of the thing with Trubisky. Trubisky was getting nailed. They threw in Foles, and he was getting nailed, and he couldn't escape. So it was like a downgrade. With Fields, he's pretty quick, but he's always had a ton of time. So we'll see how he does under pressure in Chicago.
Yeah, we will. Okay, let me get a record prediction for you, or from you, Jack. What are the Bears? Yeah, for the Bears. What are the Bears going to go?
Well, we got 17 games now, right? Does that start?
Yeah,
this
17. Yep,
yeah.
It does.
Well, you see, there's two different sides of this, because the record that I want them, like, I'll give you a what me as a fan is going to say, and then I'll give you a more neutral one.
Okay.
In that, as a fan, I really think the Bears can, if Fields is the guy, I think the Bears could win 12, 13 games.
Wow.
More realistically, if I'm a fan of another team, I would say the Bears are going to go as close to 500 as they can, probably 8-9 or 9-8, something like that.
Okay. All right. I definitely see that happening. Just seeing all the different changes that they went through, I feel like it might take a little bit of time, and hopefully they're utilizing the time they have in the preseason practices and training to kind of get those, kinks kind of ironed out. And that's what training's all about, is getting the rookies, getting the new draft picks, getting them acclimated with the team. And that's sometimes that's the hardest thing to do for a team, is to find that team chemistry, which has to more or less happen organically. You can't really make that happen.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. And there's a lot of quarterbacks, and I've talked about this a lot on this show. This year's draft was very quarterback heavy.
Right.
We see quarterbacks that have been staples, somewhat. Some would even call franchise quarterbacks that have jumped ship and rejoined another ship. So,
right.
Let me ask you this: you got to follow the Lions a little bit, do you?
Yeah. I mean,
unfortunately,
it's all over,
right?
All my people I follow are Lions fans. So.
Oh yeah, trust me, I know that. I got a lot of Lions fans too that are buddies of mine. I can't call myself a Lions fan just because I've had my heart broken too many times, and I just can't do it anymore. But how do you see the Lions doing this year with Jared Goff drafting Penei Sewell, building their line? Does that give Jared Goff more time to potentially find receivers down the field? Does that give Detroit an edge? New coaching staff?
Yeah, Detroit's definitely moving in the right direction. For a while, they were kind of like just making all these lateral moves, and they were ending up right back where they were. I don't know. It's going to be such a hit or miss season because we know Goff can be really good if he has the protection that he needs. He can at least put up good numbers. I don't know that they're going to make any significant jump overnight, but you have to think the Lions are going to be pretty good 3-4 years down the road.
You would like to think so. You would like to think so. That's a bold take, though.
But I would think so.
Yeah, I mean, Lions fans, I give them credit. I'm actually a part of a couple Detroit Lions fan pages on Facebook. God bless all of the people's souls in that group. And I look at some of the posts and they're just so diehard. They're like, oh, this is our year. Right. We're going to win. We're going to make a Super Bowl run. We're going to go to the playoffs. We got Jared Goff. We got Dan Campbell now, whole new management and back office. And, I like their spirit. I aspire to have it. Yeah. But just with the Lions, I just feel like it's too little too late. And I have people that are, my buddy's grandparents that have had their hearts broken for the better part of 5 decades. And they're just sick of it.
Yeah. Oh, I imagine so. Well, I think when you're seeing the optimism, you're seeing the overlap of Michigan fans that are in the Lions fan base. That's why you're seeing blind optimism because nobody does that better than people in Ann Arbor.
That's a great connection. I never really put 2 and 2 together, but that actually makes a lot of sense when I sit down and think about it.
The difference is that the Lions are so awful that they're, rather than thinking, they want Michigan to take the next step toward like a playoff appearance. The Lions, they're overly optimistic, but they're only optimistic that they're going to win like 10 games,
Yeah. Wow. That's a great connection. I never thought of it that way before.
Yep.
Let me ask you kind of an off the wall question. So I've had a lot of Michigan fans, diehard Michigan fans on this show and this podcast. And there's always a question that comes up and everyone seems to answer it differently, at least in their own way. Is Michigan a basketball school or a football school?
No, Michigan's a football school. Anybody who says Michigan's a basketball school is, again, they might be an NBA fan because anybody who says that's like 12 years old. Michigan, you have to do so much right in basketball to be considered a basketball school. Like MSU, historically, everything has always been better in basketball than football. MSU's a basketball school. Michigan, success in the past decade doesn't turn you into a basketball school. Like, I don't know. I think that's kind of a ridiculous claim, personally.
Okay.
I think, if you're going year by year, I guess you can call them a basketball school, but I don't know. I would call them.
See, it's a tough question. There's no right or wrong answers, but it's right. Kind of like the flavor of the month. But you ask a Michigan fan, they'll say exactly what you said. Not to compare you exactly to a Michigan fan, but they just hate. They hate being called, we're not a basketball school. Once we can fit 1 million people in the Chrysler Center, right. Then we'll be a Michigan, or then we'll be a basketball school. But it's a never-ending argument. I just figured I'd ask you just for fun. So there's another question that's kind of, this is an important question. I think everybody, is worthy of answering this question, whether they played in the league or not. So basically, we follow sports daily. For you, it's your living. For me, I do it more as a hobby, but I really enjoy doing it.
Right.
So Kendrick Perkins and Ryan Clark were talking on the show Get Up on ESPN. They had a debate, and Kendrick Perkins said it's way harder to win an NBA title than it is to win a Super Bowl. Yeah. Obviously, Ryan Clark drastically disagreed with that. Where do you stand when it comes to that argument? What's harder to win?
That's if you can approach. Sorry, I live near a street. I don't know if you can hear loud motorcycles.
I just heard it. I do too, actually.
In the NFL, you can build a team. You can slowly build a team. You can do everything right, and eventually you'll get there. In the NBA, if you don't have like LeBron or KD or Steph, you're just screwed. I mean, the only team. I mean, when Kawhi won, it almost felt like that was like he was like a huge underdog compared to. I mean, you look at him. The last guy who wasn't like a generational player to win it before that was maybe Dirk Nowitzki, who even so was a Hall of Famer. I think the NBA is harder in a way. The NBA is harder for anybody to do it. It's easy it's easy in the sense that you can just get a superstar and all of a sudden you're in contention. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I would say the NFL is easier just by access.
Okay. Wow. Interesting take. And then you look at the aspect of, okay, you got to win, the best of 7 games in the NBA playoffs.
Right.
In the NFL, you just got to win 1 game. But then
Right.
that you flip that argument and it's like you got to bring it all for that 1 game. It's almost like March Madness, winner go home type of scenario where it's like you don't have those extra games to reset and, recompile your thoughts and get everything going in the way that you want them to. You have to get it all done. With the NFL, you have to get it all done. It's a one and done deal. So it's another argument, another question that's kind of, it can go either way. You have arguments for either side of it, but that is an interesting take. So you would take the NBA as being more difficult.
Yeah. Well, also I think in the NBA, the best team is always going to win. And if it's not the best team, it's marginally different. Like in the NFL, like we saw the Giants beat the Patriots multiple times when I think anybody would agree that even if you hate the Patriots, that the Patriots were the better football team in those situations. I think that's what you see more of. That's the only reason I would consider the NBA more difficult, because you really have to be the better team because of the whole, because there's a 7-game series.
Right. And then you got to also think about, say you have a stud like LeBron or Steph. They play both sides of the ball. If you play the Patriots when they had Tom Brady, or now the Bucks, they're just one side of the ball. So that means your defense can excel and then your offense can excel and give yourself a good chance of beating that team. I think there's more upsets that are more capable of happening in the NFL compared to NBA. So really interesting stuff. Last question before I let you go. What do you aspire to be? So you're kind of into sports marketing, kind of in sports media type of, covering different sports teams and sports happenings, sports news type of thing. What do you want to end up at the end of your career?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Because, if you asked me 6 months ago, I would have said like a creative director at an advertising firm. But in terms of sports, I don't know. I think it'd be really cool to work at. I really like. I don't even follow Barstool, but I think companies like that are really cool, where they you don't have to take it so seriously. You don't have to. I think when people take sports too seriously, it kind of takes everything out of it. So I'd like to find a way. I'd like to be part of something like that. And that's very vague right now, but down the road, I don't know. I just something where I have fun with sports, as opposed to being, someone who just writes all day and is super serious about everything.
Definitely, that's a good answer, and that's something that actually we strive for here at Gen Pros. We want to have a fun take on everything that happens in the world of sports, because sports are something we enjoy, something that's the reason we get up in the morning, we breathe, we sleep, we eat it. Basically, essentially, information wise, and if you kind of get in that right mindset, you think of it that way. Right. But sports are fun, so you got to have fun with it. You can't be too serious about it. You can't be like, okay, this is cut and dry, because then it starts feeling like politics, and then it's like, okay, what are we doing? We're losing our vision here.
Right.
So you got to have fun with it. I totally agree with you. And it's, if you're not having fun with what you're doing, then you're not doing the right thing. That's always been my mentality. Right. And you got to have fun when you're doing it.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Good stuff, Jack. Well, hey, thank you for making it this far into the podcast. Everybody listening. No Jack, you got any last statements before we sign off today?
I don't have any last statements I can think of. I would have probably prepared one if I knew.
Yeah, sorry, kind of on the spot. Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to kind of promote?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
I guess just follow me on Twitter at Jack William SU. It's like, he put it down there. And if you like the Grizzlies or Texas A&M, shoot Beale Street Bears for the Grizzlies and Gig'em Gazette for Texas A&M a follow. And if you love writing, seriously, like if you're trying to get into sports writing, Fansided is such a good way to do that. And I highly recommend it. Not even just for my sites, for any site that you're interested in. It's just such a good way to get experience if you're not doing anything. So yeah,
there's a lot of great opportunities out there. And Fansided sounds like a great avenue for that, especially people that are into sports writing. Obviously, you have to have a knack for writing and grammar, I'm sure. Right?
Yeah, some people don't, and they try it. Some people they'll submit a proposal and it'll look perfect, flawless, and then they submit an article for review, and it's like some 8-year-old wrote it.
It looks like garbage. That's crazy too. And just real quick, I don't want to go too far off on a tangent, but for me, writing is actually very easy. It comes to me very naturally. I was in advanced writing classes in high school, in college. I taught in the writing center in college. So I helped other kids, finish their papers and get them done, get good grades and stuff. But for other people, it's like completely difficult, like almost impossible. I know. That disconnect is very significant. And it's crazy. I almost take it for granted. I'm sure you do too.
Right.
Compared to people that don't know how to write. It's like, really, this is simple grammar. Just talk yourself through
I know.
it. If it doesn't make sense, then chances are it's not going to make sense on paper.
Right. Well, that's the other thing too, is that I feel like a lot of people don't put the effort, like people who still use the wrong version of your and their, like, I have no sympathy for those people. They just learn it. You're 25 years old. You don't know how to use the right form of the word. But yeah, some people, I mean, when it comes to like long form writing and stuff like that, some people, they really do struggle. And it's probably in the same way. I was always awful with like science for some reason. I had a 28 on my ACT. It would have probably been like 32 because I got a 18 on my science. So
wow,
plummeted my ACT.
I'm not going to talk about what I got on my ACT, but math was always my tough one. And obviously early on, elementary, even middle school, I was a math whiz. But once I got to algebra 2, geometry, trig, all that stuff, I was like, you know what? No, I'm out. Can't do it.
Yeah. So that I once got a 40% in a math class.
Really?
In middle school.
So I commend the people that can do math very successfully and also write flawlessly, because I feel like you either have one or the other. You're a big time math whiz, or you're a big grammar writer guy.
Yeah, or you're just a big nerd.
Right, exactly. Well, good deal. Hey, I want to have you on here again because I actually got a close associate that works for Gin quite a bit, and he's an NBA analyst. His name's Chris Platty. I'll send him your way. And maybe you guys can get connected a little bit. He's a big NBA guy. He has a big NBA podcast. So I'd like to have you both on sometime soon. Maybe we can work something out sometime in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
But good deal. Thank you, everybody that tuned in today. Make sure to check out the podcast. If you didn't watch live today on YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook, check it out on Apple Podcasts and or Spotify. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you again for joining us today on the official Gen Pros podcast. I'm your host, as always, John J. II. Have a great night.